Alright everyone, it's time for the first sort of pre-game analysis of the upcoming election. Of course, I make a video anytime a person, a potentially viable candidate, enters the race. Howard Schultz might, by the way, come in as an independent. The Democrats are flipping out, even though he'd get like, what, 2% of the Democratic vote. Big fucking whoop. So we've got a lot of analysis, sort of the rough early predictions to go forth on, but you've got to understand something. Anyone trying to predict the next election with any degree of certainty right now is fooling themselves. Everything could change at a moment's notice. A candidate could keel over, they could have a major scandal or make some major mistake on a trail. So somebody who's a front runner today might have to drop out tomorrow, and we've seen stuff like that happen before. You'll remember years ago with Herman Cain. Herman Cain was a relatively popular figure. Then some allegations of an improprietous nature came out, and he quickly resigned. This can happen within politics. Of course, with Trump, when people make allegations against him, goes through the tabloid cycle, doesn't really affect him, which is perhaps his greatest advantage. So here's my general early analysis. First and foremost, you see there's going to be a fairly packed Democratic field. You now have 4 officially announced candidates. Sanders is rumored to be strongly considering a run and/or has already made up his mind to run and still hasn't announced. Maybe he's just taking the pulse of people's reaction to sort of that rumor. In fact, candidates do this a lot. Trump has done this, A/B testing. He'll put forth a proposal, and then if the public reaction is largely negative, he backtracks and does something else, and he apparently has a contingency to do so. So that's what Sanders probably is doing. It's what Warren, with her exploratory committee, more or less has been doing. My feeling is that because the race is crowded in more, she might sit it out. But then again, if you're her age and you're like, well, you know, I'm 69, I think 69 years old or something, or 67, the older side, you know, I'm going to be in the Senate for a few more years, but, you know, after that, this is basically the last hurrah. Why not just take a shot at it? I just get to go back to the Senate anyway. I'm a Democrat in a far blue district. I'll run a liberal campaign, and if I don't win, I don't win, and at least I get some extra book sales. There's really, for people who are capable of having other people raise the money for them, there's no reason not to run. That's really what it's about. That's why Schultz is considering an independent run, and he's become a major game changer, actually, and the Democrats are begging him not to run because he's more of a liberal persona. But he's saying the 2 parties suck, I'm going to run as an independent. A strong third-party candidate cripples the Democrats. But there's another secret. If you've read the keys to the White House, you'll know that one of the keys for the president, for the incumbent, is that there's no strong third-party challenge. It could actually harm Trump more, depending on how Schultz gears his message. Yes, he could be a Ross Perot-style spoiler. So yeah, I finally have to mention Ross Perot in a video there in a roundabout way. By the way, my thoughts on Ross Perot. Kind of a cool dude. Who cares about the election results decades ago? Right now, at the most rough level, I still give Trump the advantage. It has slipped because his polling numbers are at a lull right now, but they've tended to do that and then they just rise back up. Again, it can be statistical noise or it could be the result of the shutdown. He's trying to maneuver to get the Democrats to get blamed for it. He's had some measure of success. At some point, it's going to become a problem, I think, more for Pelosi's Democrats, who then on the ballot, as far as the presidency goes, being more closely associated with that sort of core of the neoliberals, the corporate Democrats of the party, who takes the worst hit? Probably the Gillibrands, honestly, and probably less so the further leftists, like the people that Cortez would be likely to endorse, like a Kamala Harris. As for Gabbard, she's such an outsider on the other end of the spectrum that I don't think that it really matters to her. It wouldn't hurt a Sanders, but it would definitely hurt a Biden, in other words, if the Democrats start taking the blame. That's the other spoiler that could happen. A Biden run, and I don't know what's happening with that. He said, well, in the next months I'll decide. Well, you know, the time to get in is fairly early. You know, the clock is ticking. You've already got 4 viable declared candidates. 1 more and you've got as many as you had in the last election and 3 more than the viable candidates you had. If Sanders gets in and then Biden has to straggle along behind, it would be, you know, anathema to him doing a good job. The same is true in reverse. If Biden were to get in tomorrow and say, well, yeah, I'm all in for 2020 because, you know, by 2024, statistically speaking, I probably won't be above ground. I'll be in the ground because he's 74 or 5 years old. He's older. Bernie Sanders would suffer possibly from that. and watching the DNC attempt to torpedo Bernie Sanders preemptively with their Me Too hit piece, their smear job, that you just know a bunch of bitter Clintonians probably put that out to their allies in the media to get him to run with the story. Oh yeah, there were allegations of impropriety among, not Sanders himself, but among some staff in his campaign. Yes, that's never happened in a campaign before, and Sanders should have come out and crucified himself in painstaking lament at the fact that somebody on his campaign had done something terrible and sexually assaulted people, or whatever the allegation was. It's like, okay, find me a campaign with which you investigate and you don't find any examples of that. It was a smear piece, it was a hit job, it was probably put out by the neoliberals. And I say that as someone who'd never back Bernie. Like, I'm certainly not a progressive. I'm arguably closer to a neoliberal than a progressive, certainly, although I'm quite far away from both of them. Liberty for all, I think, is a good thing. Neoliberals want liberty for a handful of corporations, and then the progressives don't want liberty for anyone. They call themselves progressive, and really they want to regress back to the mid-1800s, like Karl Marx era or something. I would give Trump the advantage primarily because I'm still not seeing a particularly coalesced Democratic movement. In fact, if anything, it's splintering more because, I mean, you look at the immediate reaction to Sanders was that half the party's like, oh, thank God, our savior's here, and the other half is like, no, no, never. It's never going to happen, either because he's a traitor, for some odd reason, or because his fans are bad and sexist and evil and he's a white male, or because they don't think he can win. I fall into the third category. I mean, I wouldn't vote for him because of his far-left policies, but I don't think he could win. That being said, Sanders would certainly, think about it, he'd be 77 years old, he'll put up more of a fight than these people that are, in some cases literally with Kamala Harris about half his age. In fact, a little bit less, she's 37. Is she even eligible at that age to run? I think 35 is the cutoff, but I could be wrong. It could be 40. I don't know. It'd be funny, but I mean, the Democratic Party and Republican Party at this point don't really seem to care about eligibility. Ted Cruz was the immediate runner-up last time around for the Republicans. He's born in Canada. Can't run. It's impossible. And had dual citizenship well into his Senate career until like literally 3 years ago. Yes, Ted, you're all-American dude. Certainly a total Texan. Certainly not a Cordy dude from fucking Canada. Some hayseed town up there. Was it Edmonton or something? Okay, so it's a city, but, stereotypes aside, I'm sure he was eating Timbits, not a barbecued steak, for most of his young his young years. I think almost into college, actually, if I remember correctly. Really, really fun times. I can't wait, because the one main prediction I can make with some degree of pretty close to certainty is that it's going to be chaos. It's going to be nuts watching the Democrats rip each other apart. It's going to look a lot like the Republicans doing the same thing. But now, yesterday, and I don't fully agree with this, but I'm sure a self-fulfilling prophecy at this point. It was noted that Cortez's sort of strategy was similar to Trump's, like the new wave of candidates has learned how to adapt his rough style of campaigning to overcome significant odds that are against you. Like as long as you harangue enough, you've got to be loud, you've got to brand yourself, you've got to be the most out there, you've got to be the most odd and the most strange. You see this happening online. PewDiePie essentially adopted that same branding strategy. Look, it seems to have worked. Did he what? In the last couple of years, he's doubled his number of subscribers or some insane amount, and he was already #1. Yeah, I'm sure he learned from the best. That's why he's doing the best job. It's very, very funny to see. People have got to have something to be unique. There are a lot of competitors in politics. There are a lot of competitors in YouTube or content creation in general. Got to do something unique, and it can't always be, my predictions are accurate. It's like, okay, in political analysis, if you have a field of 1,000 people and you're analyzing 2 or 3 things, you're going to have a pool of possibly dozens or hundreds of people that more or less get it right. Well, how are you going to differentiate yourself further? A little bit of a key out there for maybe people. It's a very interesting time, though. This is going to be one hell of an election. It's going to be absolutely fucking insane. It's going to be great. And so hopefully you all stay tuned, because trust me, there's going to be more analysis. And we live in a deplatforming era, but that's why I've branched out and diversified my platform. So that analysis will definitely be there on various platforms regardless. That's about all. Peace out.